It's all about the tree.
No, but how the intellect of a person is higher than that of an animal's, right? Some people.
Here, let's get to it. You ready? Are we on? You got us going?
We're going.
Okay. Thank you, Mendel. That's exactly where we left off. So once again, we said the Adam is called an Olam Katan. Man is called a little world, which means that inside of us are all the things in the world. What are we talking about primarily? The 4 levels of existence, which is Domim, Tzmei, Chayim, Medaber, inanimate, growing, animal, and man. They're all inside of us. We said in short yesterday, the inanimate is what? The letters. The growing is the emotions. The animal, the bina, the type of intellect that governs the emotions, and the chokhmah is the man inside of us, right? So we said that despite the fact that our domim, tzemeach, and chai, in other words, our letters, emotions, our inanimate, growing, and animal that's inside of man, are generally higher than the inanimate, growing, and animal outside of man. But that's not what makes us great, is that like our lower parts are greater than the rest of the world. What makes us truly unique is our intellect, right? The fact that what's unique about Adam. And therefore the question comes that the Gemara was asking when it was so perplexed about the question, Ki Adam eitz hasadeh, is man a tree of the field? Right? Now we can understand what's really bothering the Gemara, which is that man represents intellect, right? That's our true greatness. And it's true that we have emotions and they're wonderful, and even the emotions that we have, our growing level is higher than the actual world of vegetation. Nonetheless, is that the true nature of man, that he's simply his emotions? On the contrary, what makes us great is really our intellect. So that's what's bothering the Gemara, right? That we said that's what like the secret, real question of the Gemara was looking at this very spiritually, is how can you call man by his emotions alone? Yes? Remember that. So please turn to page 96, second column, second paragraph down, where we left off. Kushiyas HaGemara mischazekes yoser. But the question of the Gemara is even deeper than that. Why? Al pia yidu, according to what's known, he brings in the Zohar, Sha'adam nikra ba'arba torim, man is called by 4 names. What are the 4 names? Adam, Ish, Gever, and Enosh. Right? There are 4 words that mean man in the whole Torah. Adam, Ish, Gever, Enosh. They're all names for man. And Shekein Torah Ish Moral Midos Adam. When you talk about the word Ish, right? Sorry, I skipped a line. Adam. What's the most significant of all these 4 names? The highest level when you call man Adam is the word Adam itself. And the word Ish refers to the midos of a man, right? So we're talking about Adam. When you call a man Adam, you're really representing his greatest qualities, which is his intellect. When you call a man Ish, you're referring to his emotional reality, his EQ, right? The Torah Ish, moral midos Adam, but Torah Adam al sichlo, whereas the name Adam refers to his intellect. So the Gemara is asking, who can figure out what's the real deep question of the Gemara based on what we just said? Exactly. If you want to say Ish, right, eitz hasadeh, right? Ki Ish eitz hasadeh, is man a tree in the field? If you've used the word Ish, which refers to our intellect, it's a lot less troublesome, right? Because there is an aspect of man who is emotion. But when Ish, which refers to our emotion, it wouldn't be so strange. But when you call Adam eitz hasadeh, you're specifically calling man by his intellect. And then simultaneously, in one breath, you call him a tree of the field. You call him an emotional being. The Gemara is annoyed by this. And it's a pasuk that doesn't make any sense. Ha'im amidos hentachlis hamayla b'ashleimus sheba'adam, are the midos the ultimate man, Adam, that because of that he's called by this wondrous name Adam? Al kain mitaretzes haGemara. Therefore, the Gemara has to come up with an answer to this question. And what is the answer? It's a very deep and beautiful answer. It's a very deep lesson in life. Tachliso shel seichol Adam. Yes, the purpose of the intellect of man, even the highest frame of the intellect of man, sheyeded v'yashpia al midosav, is that it should come down and make an impression on your midos. In other words, that's all you really are. As great as your intellect is, it's only there in order to make you a mensch and make you have proper, healthy emotions. And if not, you're not a man at all. Shamidos yisnagu al pi haseichel, meaning that your midos should conduct themselves in accordance to your intellect and not flying off in their own, animalistic ways. V'zeh dafke hishleimuso shel adam, and that in fact is the wholeness of man. So in other words, we're not very excited about your intellect, right? We are excited about your intellect if you can show me that you're an Eitz HaSadeh, right? If your intellect has produced a tree of the field, then I can call you a man. Haseichel levado eino mevi shleimus ha'adam. If you're just smart, that is not called being a full person. You're not a man. Hamatar shel v'yidaita hayom, right? What's the pasuk? V'yidaita hayom v'ashevosa levavecha ki Hashem hu Elokim, right? You shall know today, and you shall place on your heart. We say this every day in the Aleinu, right? That God is your God, etc. There's nothing else but Him. So what does the actual word say? V'yidaita hayom. You shall know today. But you shall know in order to place it upon your heart that the Havana and the Das and Elokus, all your knowledge of godliness, all your Gemara learning and all of your Chassidus learning, and you become great, brilliant scholars, what's it all for? Right? If you don't hashivosa el levavecha, if you don't place it on your heart, if it doesn't change you and make you an emotionally upright person, you're not a man. Right? Al tavuna sichlis lashpia alalev. Your intellectual prowess is there in order to affect your heart. The makum hamidos, the place of the midos. And the Gemara mevaeres zos b'mashal me'etz. And therefore the Gemara brings this all out in a mashal of a tree. Kashem shachashivus ha'etz hu bekach shematzmiach peiros. In other words, remember we said there's many ways to compare man to a tree. Why is it so significant? This particular mashal that the Gemara brought. Remember the question from yesterday? We said that why is the Gemara so surprised that man is compared to a tree? We find throughout many places that man is compared to a tree. What's that? Even so, right? That the fact that man is like a tree, in other words, in the Sifrei, it didn't from this pasuk, it didn't compare man to a tree. It said man gets sustained from a tree. And the Gemara compares man to a tree itself. But the Gemara is like shocked by it. Is man a tree? Why is it so shocked? We said there's many comparisons of man to a tree throughout all the Mishnah and everywhere else. So we said somehow this particular example that it gives, which seems on the outset just like another example of a comparison of man to a tree, somehow is not. Somehow this example that's given, which is that if the man has fruits, which is the Talmud Chacham, you should eat from him, learn from him, and if not, you should turn from him, right? So somehow the Gemara was satisfied that this is the ultimate example which really makes man like a tree. And this is why. Because what's the Gemara really saying? Is the Adam, the Seichel, really the emotions, right? Is that what the man really is merely his emotions? It says yes. And I'll give you an example. Like a tree. What's the purpose of a tree, right? The importance and the significance of a tree is that it grows fruits.
So shouldn't it be like Amidas Chassadim instead of Talmud Chacham? You could take the fruit from Chassadim instead of Talmud Chacham?
No, but the whole idea is that you can have Gemius Chasadim. It has nothing to do with your Seichel, right? The whole idea of a Talmud Chacham is that he is wise. But what is the significance of his wisdom is that you can eat from him. In other words, that he's worth learning from, not because he's worth learning from his wisdom. He's worth learning from because he grows fruits like a tree, right? Which is basically the emotions, right? Kach gam ha'adam, so too it is the man, which is, we said, represents the Seichel, which is the Talmud Chacham. But that's why it says, use the version of the story of a Talmud Chacham, because this represents the pinnacle of what Adam is, right? Someone who's filled with wisdom. What's it all there for? Yisro shel Talmud Chacham hu shekashu hagon. When is he a true Talmud Chacham and he's worthy of the name? Kishaseichel mashpi al midosav. Only when the intellect changes him as a person, changes his midos. Mosifos acher kach chayus b'kiyum ha-mitzvos my peros mitzvahs. And then that would then add into the chayas of his fulfillment of mitzvahs. In other words, a person has emotions. What are the emotions there for? Right? The emotions are there to power your deeds and your actions. So Gulus Chasadim is actually a result of really if a person's heart is really in it. As like it says in Tanya, that all the positive mitzvahs are really an extension of your love of God. And all the negative mitzvahs are an extension of your fear of God. So the fruits that come out because your emotions have been charged and transformed by your intellect. And it says, my perus mitzvahs, what are the fruits of a man really? So if you look at the Gemara of Sot over there, we learn that the fruits of a man are mitzvahs. He's quoting the Gemara over there, because what's the Chiddush? Is that it's talking about the Egla Arufa. What's the Egla Arufa?
The cow, someone's murdered.
The calf, right? It's a little calf. That's important to the story. That gets hatcheted in the back of the neck. When do we do this? When there is a dead body that's found and you don't know who was murdered, you don't know who killed him. So you have to measure to see which city it's closest to, etc., etc. And then they bring the sages of that city a little calf, and they kill this calf in a barren land, right? And so we say, why does it have to be a calf, and why is it a barren land, right? So they say, because let's take this calf that didn't get old enough to have any children, and we'll kill him in a barren land which doesn't produce anything, to atone for this person that you didn't let him live long enough to have fruits, right? So he says, what are his fruits? They try to figure out, what are the fruits of man? They say children, right? Maybe the fruits of man are children. So they say, well, how do you know this guy didn't have children? Maybe he had children, right? So that doesn't accomplish it. So they come to the realization, my perus mitzvahs. The fruits of a man are his mitzvahs. Because you did stop him from doing any further mitzvahs, right? Now he can't produce any more fruits. Sure, he produced fruits before, but you stopped him from producing fruits. So the idea is, from here we learn that man is like a tree. There again, you see, the man is like a tree. His purpose is to produce these fruits, which is good deeds. So therefore, if he's a Talmud Chacham, all of it is only really there to get to this level of good deeds. Yeah.
But the intellect is still the highest. The emotions aren't becoming higher because they're dependent on the intellect. They're just the vessel.
The emotions, wait, what do you mean? The emotions aren't becoming higher?
The emotions aren't now becoming higher than the intellect because they're dependent on the intellect. The intellect is still higher than the emotions. And the fact that it says...
When you say higher, though, you're right and you're wrong. In other words, because higher, if you just grade them, which is a more sophisticated koach, yes, we would agree. Intellect is more sophisticated. But if you think about what's the intention, right? So you could say, what's the greatest world in Hashem's mind? Atzilus or Asiya? So there's no question. Atzilus, if you mark them like on a grade, Atzilus is this godly world which is infinitely higher kochos than the physical world. However, guess what? God would never have created anything unless he was going to get to the world of Asiya. He's not going to just make Atzilus because he's bored one day. The only reason he made Atzilus was to get to Bri Yitzira and finally Asiya. So in terms of intention and kavana, there's no question that the emotions are the ikar. They're more important, they're more significant, they're the purpose. So yes, there's a higher level, but that higher level is only really serving its function if it's bringing out the purpose of the lower level. So therefore, you're not really a man, you're useless as a man. Unless you're producing this tree of the field, this emotion.
Right, but you're also useless as a man. You're like an animal if you don't have the intellect. You're like a Asiya without Atzilus.
Okay, but only because if you don't have the intellect, then for sure you're not going to be producing any fruits, right? If you don't have any intellect, then your emotions are not going to be controlled by your mind, and you're going to be doing all kinds of wild things. The point is you have a mind. So you could use it, right? And you might think, well, I'm producing all this tremendous thought, I'm learning and I'm passing all my, by the way, we had an A+ for our first test today. Well done. So you say, I'm on the top of the curve, I'm such a smart person. The reality is that's really not enough, right? If your intelligence is not showing up as a transformation of your emotions, then turn from this person, cut him down, don't learn from him, run away from him. So what kind of advantage do you have in intellect if it causes you to be something which is now despised by men, right?
So then seemingly it should be the ultimate end goal should be the deed, should be the letters.
It is.
Not the
But basically what he's saying is that you can't have any deeds. That's what I just mentioned a minute ago. What's powering your deeds is your love and fear. right? So if you don't produce love, if you have love and fear of God, it's going to produce itself. In other words, it's going to express itself. How does it express itself? As the fulfillment of mitzvahs, right? If you don't have love and fear of God, you're not going to make any fruits, right? So it is, in fact, true that the lowest level is how it comes to expression. But Adam, Eitz HaSadeh, still works, because if your Adam is producing healthy emotions, you will bear fruit.
So all three are equally important for the process then. All three are the highest.
When you say the highest, fine, but the point is, what are we coming to say here? That you might think that you can be defined by the greatness of your intellect alone, right? That I am great because I am intelligent, right? That's what he's coming to. That's what the Torah is coming to negate. There's a pasuk in Torah, after all. So the pasuk in Torah is coming to tell you, don't get so excited about the proficiency of your mind. If it's not producing a change in your emotions, you get cut down. If this mind does not produce fruits, which are themselves an extension of your love and fear, we're going to cut you down. We're not going to learn from you. You're not achieving the greatness of man. Even though you say, what do you mean? I'm Albert Einstein. What could be greater than the greatness of man? I've changed the whole world with my intelligence alone. We're going to cut you down. You're not a man. It's not a man. Okay, Dalit. You guys okay out there? I can see that you learned very well today. You're exhausted.
No.
I'm thinking about changing the time of this class all of a sudden.
Where else is this minor going to go? Seem to wrap everything up.
We didn't wrap up anything. There's so much more. Okay. Ha'olam hakatan adam domi le'olam hagado. Going further, the lower man, right, the small man, I should say, which is us, it's compared to the olam hagado, right, which is the world at large. Kishem sheba'olam hagado. So what do we say in the world at large, outside of man? Ha'adam nizon ha'adam be'ikr min hatzomeach. We said from the Sifrei that the man primarily gets nourished from the vegetation. Mishum sheshorsho shel hatzomeach naili yosher min ha'medaber. And why do we say that? We said because the source of the vegetation world contains deep-seated godliness, which is actually higher than the man. When we elevate it by eating it, we unearth its true nature, and then it sustains us. What's that?
What was the first statement by Paul?
That the olam hakatan, the small world, which is man, it's compared to the large world, the world outside of us. So just like in the large world outside of us, right, man is sustained by vegetation, right? In other words, in the large world, we're also a part of that large world, right? In the inanimate, growing, and animal kingdoms, we're also part of the bigger world. We're the man. And we see that the man in that world is sustained by something which is lower than him and is nourished by something which is lower than him. It's just what? Why do we sort of belittle the lower stages of reality? And you wouldn't think to compare a fruit with a human being. You say, it's nothing. Like you said, if you grade them on a curve, it's nothing. Only because it fell out of its natural habitat of godliness, and it sort of got encloaked into klippas. So therefore, it looks lower. But once man has eaten it and then sort of turned it into man, then, on the contrary, you're going to see that this lower thing is actually higher than you, and it added life force into you. Because its source is higher. This is exactly what we were just talking about. Try and put it all together. So just like it is in the world at large, that you have vegetables and man, so too in the small world where we have vegetables and man. What is vegetables? Right? Our emotions. What is man? Your intellect. It works in the same exact way. Right? He says that the midos yesh shorish naileva amok yosem asher b'seichel. This is what we just were speaking about. I was trying to convince you, but let the Rebbe convince you. Right? In fact, the midos are higher and much deeper in their source than the intellect itself. In other words, when it comes down to it, your emotions, even though they've fallen lower than your intellect, and a person who's going to come and say, what's higher, love and fear or genius of the mind, you would seemingly point to the intellect. The reality is that's only because the emotions fell out of grace, so to speak, their source is higher. The emotions of man come from a higher source that is intellect. But since, at least in a revealed way, the emotions show themselves as being lower than the intellect, right? We pride ourselves on the greatness of the mind over the midos. Therefore, just like we pride ourselves on the greatness of man over his food, therefore, there's a need for the intellect to have an influence on the emotions and to, so to speak, assert its dominance over the emotions as though it's higher than the emotions, because the emotions are meanwhile sitting in a fallen state, and to refine them and to purify them, just like we do to our food, right? In its fallen state, like a bagel is in fact lower than you. But when you eat the bagel, and then you take this food and you turn it into flesh and blood like your own, that blood that's inside of you suddenly gives a surge of power and life force into you. So you unleashed its source. The same exact thing is true when it comes to the vegetation inside of man. It looks like it's lower than your intellect, but when your intellect will eat it, in other words, it will try to control it and dominate it and elevate it by essentially trying to have emotions that are controlled by the mind, right? That you're going to decide to love that which makes sense to love through your intellectual meditations. You're going to fear that which makes sense to fear through your intellectual meditations, not just because of your natural nature. So therefore, when you elevate the emotions through your mind and refine them, as mashpios amidos b'seichel. So just like the food, it then turns around and shows its higher source and actually is mashpia on you. It's what makes you whole, and they are what make you a man. Right? You understand what's going on here? It's the emotions that actually complete you and make you great, not the mind. Just like the food is what made you live, not your own basic just self, right? Your self would be ultimately perish if it didn't get this extra chayas from a higher life force in the food. It's just that it had to refine that life force to make it come out, and then it shows itself to be truly greater. So too with your emotional world. It looks lower. When you refine it, you unlock its true greatness, and then it is what is actually mashpia on you to make you whole. As we said, v'yedaita hayom, the whole reason of knowing God today is only l'hashivosa el levavecha, to place it on your heart. That's the purpose of your knowledge. It's so that your emotions will be great, because they're really the true nature of man. They actually are really you, right? The true you is your emotions. If you don't have them, you're nothing, right? Because they empower you, because in truth, their source is actually higher than the mind.
So then if someone would have their emotions rule over their mind, then would they be drawing their mind down to a fallen state?
Yes,
basically?
yes.
Would be like reversing it?
Yes, because oftentimes that's actually what happens. The mind begins to justify the negative behavior. You start using your mind literally as like a dog which is following your emotions wherever they want to go. Because the mind can be used for evil, right? There's wicked people in the world who are very, very smart. How are they getting away with this? Because their emotions are what's empowering their entire lives. And then their mind, they use them to justify and make sense of their own devious desires. So this is the hepech of Kedusha, the opposite of holiness.
So you can't unlock the higher source of the emotions from the emotions themselves.
No.
You have to use something which manifests higher.
Just like you can't unlock the power in a bagel unless you eat it, right? You have to basically elevate the lower life form through the higher life form in order to realize that the lower life form actually is higher than the higher life form. I'll say that one more time. You have to elevate the lower life form by the higher life form, only to realize that lower life form was actually higher than the higher life form to begin with. It has a higher source. So this is like the whole interesting reciprocity that goes on in so many functions of the world, like man and woman, for example, right? We have the same idea. Man is Zah, woman is Malchus. So man is, so to speak, supposed to be the mashpia in the relationship. And he comes and he basically like lifts up the women. He acquires her and he takes her into her home, and only to what? To unleash her power, that really her root is higher than his, and then she winds up elevating him. A man cannot be a king unless he's married. You can't be a Kohen Gadol unless he's married. Right? But it says a woman just waiting to be married, she'd rather be married to a Slav than not be married at all. There's like a longing right? It says to your husband will be your longing. They have like this realization that they want to have a mashpia over them, only to realize that when they get, so to speak, consumed by this mashpia, it unlocks their true essence, and then they're mashpia onto the man. They give him children, etc. They make him bigger. So now just to conclude, because I know we're out of time, we're answering now the third question that we started off with. And this is the connection between the Sifrei and the Gemara. What was Adam, ki Adam etz hasadeh according to the Sifrei? Get sustained by the food. What was Adam, ki Adam etz hasadeh according to the Gemara? We are a tree. Now, we said, how do these things go together? The Rebbe's brilliance, they're actually, you can see very clearly, they're one and the same. What? The connection is, there's the same point in both the Sifrei and the Gemara. And what is it? They're both explaining the elevation, the advantage, I should say, in the medaber, in the man, that comes from the vegetation. Just what? In the Sifrei, it's talking about the person and the vegetation in the big world, right? In the big world, where there's actually vegetables, right? We see that the man is elevated and empowered from a lower kingdom, from the vegetable kingdom. And in the Gemara, it's talking about the same exact thing. It's just talking about the man, the small world, where you are actually elevated through your vegetable kingdom, which is your emotions, that they actually empower you and make you whole. So this mamash is exactly the same thing. That's a serious chap from the Rebbe, if you ask me, to put those two things together, but it makes perfect sense. And it's ani ladodi vadodi li. What's that? Yeah, the world of the Sifrei, which is talking about actual vegetables and man, the vegetables nourish the man, right? And we get more koach from the lower dimension. So take that whole thing inside the little world, which is man himself. You also have man and vegetable, your intellect and your emotion. And so too, the emotions wind up being mashpia on the intellect and make you whole and give you chayas and life force. The only difference between these two stories is if you're talking about the big world or the small world. Otherwise, they're exactly the same point.